Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? As the Saints start to navigate what life might be like without Derek Carr for however long that may be, this all falls right in the midst of the Davante Adams news. You don't need me to tell you, but I'll reiterate, Davante Adams, 2 years ago, we could have made the argument he's the best receiver in football. And 8 years with Green Bay, perennial all-pro there with Aaron Rodgers. Ends up with his former college teammate, Derek Carr, with the Raiders. Has a great season there with Derek Carr, individual season. And then Carr comes to New Orleans, and he's caught passes from 5 different quarterbacks in Las Vegas. And so now Davante Adams, who was inactive last week because of a hamstring, and apparently is going to be inactive again this week. Let's be honest, he ain't hurt. It's just a matter of them not wanting him to get hurt and potentially harm his trade value. You see this all the time in sports near a trade deadline. So no surprise, Adams didn't play last week and not likely to play this week for the Raiders either. But the question is, where might he land? It's been stated pretty publicly that the Saints and the Jets are the two preferred destinations because he wants to play with a quarterback he knows. That would be Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr. There are other teams that have gotten in the mix. The Steelers, the Chiefs have expressed interest, according to many reports. But I found this fascinating. So on Wednesday morning, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN reported that the New Orleans Saints might actually be the favorite. I'll read from his report just very briefly here. Speaking of Adams, the Raiders have told at least one team involved in a potential trade they don't plan to front the bill on any of the $16.89 million salary. Perhaps negotiations change that, but that has been the perceived stance from Las Vegas. Teams I've talked to believe the Saints might just be the favorite because they are on Adams' short list of preferred destinations and are willing to be aggressive. He goes on to note that the Jets are involved, but the Raiders will go with the best package, and that, of course, Adams prefers to go to either the Jets or the New Orleans Saints. So Jeremy Fowler reporting that the Saints might just be the favorite here to land Davante Adams. Now, one thing that has to be considered is, what does the Derek Carr injury mean for Davante Adams, for the Saints' even willingness to engage in trade conversations? I mean, if you lose this weekend and you have the quick turnaround against Denver and you lose there, and all of a sudden you're 2-5, what are you playing for? I mean, you're not digging out of that hole. That's just not a real thing that can happen for this team this year with or without Derek Carr and Davante Adams. So the timing, I think, is interesting, and the Saints will have to make some type of calculated risk here with an aging wide receiver who's nearing 32 years old and has a lot of money still on his contract, as we've already detailed. Adam Schefter was on Greeny on ESPN Radio earlier on Wednesday, and one of the interesting things to keep in mind is while the Saints now are navigating life without Derek Carr for an indefinite amount of time, if it's 1 game, 2 games, whatever, so too are the New York Jets going through a bit of tumult. Now, Aaron Rodgers is still there, but they just fired Robert Saleh. So Schefter was asked how the Jets firing Saleh might impact a potential Davante Adams trade.
That's, they got to get their coaching staff straightened out.
Yeah.
And, that right now is on the back burner, even though they're having ongoing conversations. And I'm sure Jeff Ulbrich, is on board with whatever they want to do as a team. So that'll be up to the owner and the general manager.
It's a pretty nondescript answer, but he's not wrong. Robert Saleh wasn't going to make the decision about trading for Davante Adams, and an interim coach won't make that decision either. Does the owner and the GM want to do a deal giving up assets for Davante Adams? I mean, it's very clear where the Jets are. The Jets pumped a lot of resources into a 40-year-old quarterback who's now coming off an Achilles injury. You realize your window is rapidly closing. If there are issues with this team, with Robert Saleh, at its helm, you got to fix it and fix it in a hurry because you don't have time to wait and work through it. It's not like what may be happening in Chicago or Washington is playing fantastic right now, but where you might have a young quarterback and you're going through those growing pains. New England may be a better example where they're shifting quarterbacks now going to Drake May. But the point being, if you're trying to win now, can Davante Adams help you win now? Yes. You just have to ask yourself the question, how much are you willing to leverage for that opportunity? The example I give all the time is Denver. Denver went all in a decade ago with Peyton Manning. Peyton was at the end of his career. They went all in on Peyton Manning. They brought in Von Miller. They brought in Aqib Talib. They went all in. And they went to 2 Super Bowls, and they won one of them. And they haven't been back to the playoffs for a decade since. They have not been able to figure out how to reset their organization after they went all in with Peyton. But if I asked you, would you if I told you the Saints in the next 2 years are going to go to 2 Super Bowls, win one of them, but they're not going to make the playoffs for a decade after that, you taking that? Damn right you are. Everybody would take that. So that's the boat the Jets are in, very firmly. They got Aaron Rodgers. They got an aging quarterback. They got to win right now. Do you give up assets for Davante Adams if it helps you? Absolutely you do. Like, that's not even a question, especially when the offense is struggling the way they are. The Saints, it's a little more complicated because I don't think the Saints are close to winning, but the organization clearly feels differently. If you missed this, Schefter also had the report about the Saints, who he reported have formally reached out to the Raiders about Davante Adams.
Well, they are one of the 2 teams that he would like to play for, Scott. Davante Adams ideally would like to play with a quarterback that he's been matched with before. That would be either Aaron Rodgers in New York with the Jets or Derek Carr in New Orleans with the Saints. Now, the Saints have been monitoring the situation. They've spoken with the Raiders. The Raiders have been adamant that they want a second-round pick plus in return for Davante Adams. And so far, there hasn't been a lot of progress so far. We'll see if anything can change.
For me, if you're the Jets, you'll gladly give up a second-round pick plus to get Davante Adams, or you'll negotiate and you'll start there. For the New Orleans Saints, that's a little more complicated from my perspective. And I wouldn't do it. Listen, if the Saints were sitting here today, if the offense we had seen for the first 2 weeks had carried on without the injuries, and the Saints were sitting here at 4-1, hypothetically. Let's say they started 4-0, and they managed to beat Philly, they finished off Atlanta, and then they lose on Monday Night Football at KC. Fine, you're 4-1. If you're sitting there at 4-1, I'm like, hell yeah, go make that trade. You're 4-1. Like, you're leading the division. You're going to be a playoff team. What do you need to get you? Who can make a play to get you over the hump in a playoff game and help you advance? Of course, I would do that deal. At 2-3, now with a makeshift offensive line, you're going to be without your starting quarterback, who's the reason Davante Adams is even interested in the Saints for a couple of games now, which could bury you further in the cellar. I mean, you could be looking up at 2-5 a week from tomorrow. And if you are, you're not getting out of that with or without Davante Adams. You're not a playoff team. So do you give up future assets? And I look at what the Saints have been able to do just with second-round picks. I mean, you can roll your eyes and say, what's the value of a pick? And yeah, I mean, Stanley Jean-Baptiste was a second-round pick. That's a fact. So is Kool-Aid McKinstry. Isaiah Foskey was a second-round pick. So was Alontae Taylor. Pete Werner was a second-round pick. I mean, Eric McCoy was a second-round pick. You can go through the list, y'all. Marcus Williams was a second-round pick. Michael Thomas was a second-round pick. Hau'oli Kikaha was a second-round pick. So you got swings and misses. But you got a lot of dudes who have been immediate starters and contributors for you that have become franchise-type players at their position. And when you are older and pushing toward a reset, I don't know that I want to give up that asset, an opportunity to get younger in an inexpensive way on a rookie contract for a loaded contract for an aging player to join a team that right now is 2-3 and could be looking at 2-5 a week from tomorrow. So Context matters. You had asked me this week too if Davante Adams was available to be acquired after week 2 and the Saints were 2-0 and rolling. Absolutely, you do that deal. Today, not me. Good luck in New York. We'll follow it, see what may happen. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.